Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our live webinar, Introduction to Advertising on LinkedIn. Today, we're going to cover the products that are available to marketers to reach over 470 million professionals around the world on LinkedIn. Let me progress our slide. Sorry, guys, a little technical issue there, but hopefully you can see our next slide now. Right, so what are we talking about today? Well, I'll cover some background on context and the mindset of LinkedIn members so you know what people are doing when they are exposed to your brand messaging on LinkedIn. Then I'll introduce our core ad products so you'll understand different ways you can engage with the world's professionals. We'll talk about targeting, which enables you to reach the right audience at the right time by harnessing the power of LinkedIn's first-party and member-generated data. And then I'll open up Campaign Manager and share a live demo so you can see how to go into LinkedIn and set up a campaign. And lastly, we'll close with a few questions from the audience. Now, typically, we get more questions than we can cover in our session together. So to make the most of whatever time is left, I'll address the questions that are the most popular in the Q&A box first, and then get down to the others if there is time. To put a question into the Q&A box, there's a box right next to the slides on your console or screen. Simply enter in your question, hit submit. The answers will appear above the questions. If you don't see an answer right away, just hit refresh. But if it's a question to be answered at the Q&A session, we'll add it to the queue and get to it as quickly as we can at the end. So a little introduction before we get started. My name is Jennifer Bunting, and I'll be your host for this 45-minute session. I lead both product and content marketing efforts at LinkedIn's Marketing Solutions business in Asia-Pac. So basically, my job is to share with other marketers how they can use LinkedIn to drive business results. And I also use our products myself, along with our team here in Asia-Pacific, in all of our campaigns. Sometimes I meet marketers who say something like, LinkedIn's really great and I should be advertising on it, but I just don't know how. By the end of the session today, hopefully you'll see how and be able to run campaigns of your own. This session will be recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording as well as the slides afterwards. So let's kick off. Let's start off talking about context. I'll show you what members are doing when they're on LinkedIn. It's very important to know the context your messaging will run alongside because the mindset that people are in when they come to LinkedIn is a little different than you might find on other social platforms. So this next screen will show you a typical homepage that members see when they log into LinkedIn. This is their news feed, and it's full of information from their personal and professional network, brands, universities, groups they follow. Now, many people get stuck into this misconception that people only come to LinkedIn when they're wanting a new job, but that's untrue. In fact, only 13% of our total page views are even job-related content. What this means for us as marketers is that 87% of LinkedIn's page views are on content in the news feed and other pages with unique content that you can't find anywhere else other than LinkedIn, not on jobs. For marketers, this is really exciting because we're able to engage with people who are highly engaged in the content they're consuming. And of course, for HR professionals, it's exciting too because they're actually looking for passive candidates and people who are not actively in the job pool. So it's a win for all of us. Additionally, it's important to note that LinkedIn is mobile first, and you should always remember that when you're thinking about the type of content you want to distribute on the network. Most of our page views now occur on mobile devices, and it's growing. The daily activity and engagement we see on LinkedIn on mobile increases by approximately 30% year on year. So what do people do when they come to LinkedIn? Well, one of the things I want to let everyone know about is publishing. They are consumed because this is content that people can consume and can't find anywhere else. When LinkedIn launched publishing, this was essentially an offering to allow professionals to do long-form article posting, very similar to blogging, but in a professional context. Today, we have over 500 titans of industry, politicians, visionaries, and thought leaders who are our leaders on the network. These include people like Brian Solis of the Altimeter Group, Prime Minister of India Modi, David Sable, CEO of Young and Rubicon, and Australia's Naomi Simpson. We also have other thought leaders like Richard Branson and Arianna Huffington, who you may already be following today. But these aren't the only people writing and sharing content. Everyone on LinkedIn has an opportunity to share their perspective. In fact, over 160,000 unique articles are written and posted on LinkedIn every week. Now, this is quickly replacing someone's blog that they may have to address their thoughts for the professional environment, just because the scale and visibility it can get. The average post by the average everyday LinkedIn member, not even a thought leader or influencer, is seen across 148 industries in 99 countries. But it's not just articles that people are consuming on LinkedIn. Professionals share different types of content when they come here, and their mindset is different. Last week, I did a search, just a quick check, or rather earlier this week, sorry, right after the Oscars, to see what were people talking about on Facebook and Twitter. And so you saw your usual suspects about different types of content related to the Oscar results, different sporting events. But LinkedIn was different. The trending content on LinkedIn was more focused on a professional environment, topics related to helping them be more productive and successful. So in short, the context of LinkedIn is that people come here to invest time. People aren't killing time or wasting time. They're not checking memes while they wait in line at the grocery store. So for advertisers, you're getting a highly engaged mindset in a very brand-safe environment. So next, I'll talk about our ad products. And before we get started on that, I'd like to ask you a question. So hopefully you can see a question coming up now. There we go. Okay. What promotion tactics are you using to share branded content? I'll give everyone a moment to fill in their questions here, and then I'll share the results. Okay, let's see. Hopefully it's showing up on your screen now. Seeing about 31% of our audience is using search. A few are using programmatic display, email and newsletters, offline. A few people don't have content to promote, but the overwhelming majority are using social. Excellent. What we see industry-wide for trends as well. So I think I will start off by sharing a little bit about sponsored content. This is our most popular ad product on LinkedIn. Sponsored content is a way to allow brands to speak directly to professionals in their news feed using promoted posts. Marketers are adopting this tactic heavily. In Australia alone, the content marketing industry reports that 88% of B2B marketers use LinkedIn to promote their content. And the performance is strong. Here you see some benchmarks. Now, I specifically pulled up some benchmark ranges for APAC. Each country in the region may differ, as well as industry, and different seniorities of people may interact with content differently, but this will give you a good barometer to understand what does good look like and where should you be falling. So in general in APAC, if you're falling between a click-through rate on sponsored content between 0.28 and 0.60, you're doing really well. And just to give you some kind of global context and how APAC audiences interact with content compared to the rest of the world, you can see that in the UK, for example, it's between 0.21 and 0.45%. Now, last year, LinkedIn rolled out a new feature for sponsored content. This is LinkedIn conversion tracking for sponsored content. So it's still in an early stage of adoption across the industry on LinkedIn, but globally we're seeing about a 5.1 conversion rate off of ads people run on LinkedIn. And you can compare this with average landing page conversion rates according to Search Engine Land and see that we are twice as effective as that. So let's touch on the ad specs. if you advertise on other social networks, then I'm happy to say you'll feel very comfortable with the ad format of sponsored content on LinkedIn. So this will animate here, and I can show you what to expect. First, you have your company name and your brand logo. This is pulled directly from your company page or showcase page on LinkedIn. Company pages and showcase pages are very similar, the same thing, but you'll have your name and basic company information there. So knows to pull it automatically, and you don't have to do any uploads of your logos. Next is the headline. Now the headline is optional, but I believe it's a nice to have piece of information if you want to add more context around the visual that you're showing. Generally, you should always attach some sort of rich media or visual. And I would say keep the headline relatively short. You have a max of 150 characters there. You can do less. You can do more, but it will be cut off, particularly on mobile. Also, I would say play around with the types of headlines you use. You can make a bold statement. You could be a bit controversial. You could ask a question. You could A/B test the type of headline that you use. The main thing you're going to want to focus on, though, is the image. You want to attach a 1200 by 627 image to your sponsored content in order to get the best results. So some things you may want to consider when you're deciding which image to use, and I highly recommend A/B testing different images. One is humans versus object. As people, we're just genetically programmed to react to faces and to people. So if you do have images that include people or models, go with those. It's always nice to test it against an object or some scenery, but in general, try to use humans whenever possible. Also remember your colors and your color palette. Try to keep your colors bright, bold colors. Those tend to attract the human eye. You may also want to test overlaying text. Now, the image you see on this example, there isn't a text overlay, but we'll often A/B test text overlays on our image. If you're used to using Facebook advertising, you may recall that there is a 20% max of space you can take out if you're putting text on top of your image. We don't have that restriction on LinkedIn, so you can play around with that look and feel. You can also put a call to action button over the top of it. One last important thing to point out, and I just pulled up a highlight so you can see exactly where this is the follow button. So the follow button is optional and allows you to generate more followers for your company page or showcase page. So if this is important for you, I suggest including it. But if it's not, I would suggest omitting it. And when we go into the live demo, it's very easy, just one click of a button to include it or exclude it. So I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to do another little poll question related to sponsored content or just content in general. Curious to know what type of content your brand shares. So the quiz is up there. I'll give a few seconds and then we'll see the results, what everyone is doing. Okay, so I didn't give everyone as long this time, just to move things along, but it looks like about 36% are sharing company news and updates, a little bit of video, product information, white papers and ebooks, infographics. Excellent. Okay, so what should you share on LinkedIn? Well, you can share anything that you like, but popular types of content would include white papers, SlideShare presentations, industry news, company news, a lot of the things that you just said that you're already doing. So that's fantastic. The bottom line, though, is not to get overwhelmed with the type of format that you're sharing. For example, I get asked very often questions around whether to focus on infographics, webinars, blog posts, what kind of content to share on LinkedIn that works best. And the answer is that all of the above can work. It just depends on the quality of the content that you're sharing and whether that specific content is relevant to the audience that you're targeting. So we'll talk about targeting and relevance more in a moment. In the meantime, let's move on to sponsored InMail. Sponsored InMail allows brands to communicate privately and at scale directly inside the messaging environment in LinkedIn. People targeted with an InMail will see it in their inbox, and they can click through to read more and take action. A really cool thing about sponsored InMail is that there's a cap, so it's an exclusive environment because you can't see a branded or promoted sponsored InMail any more frequently than one every 60 days. That's even from yourself retargeting the same audience if you were to win that auction and hit that audience. So it's a very exclusive spot. So as you can see in the animation, it would live in your inbox. You click through, and that's what it looks like on your mobile device. Now, there's more space here than a sponsored content post, and it can feel more personal. So it's a great complement to go in addition to a sponsored content campaign. This ad unit is also another top performer. So if you compare it to email, which is always great if you have around a 20% open rate, well, depending on the market you're in as well, sponsored InMail has an average open rate between 30 and 40%. And I've included open rates for other regions as well. And then in a click-through rate perspective, you can see that the click-through rates are really strong too. We have between a 2 and 5% click-through rate. So it's a great way to grab someone's attention. So just like I showed you the specs on sponsored content, I'll show you for sponsored InMail as well. So first I'll touch on the sender. So the sender can be an employee or brand advocate, assuming you have their permission to use their likeness to represent your brand. It can also be your company page or your showcase page. And in that case, it would pull your brand logo and the company name that you listed. Another important facet is, of course, the subject line. Very important, just like in email marketing. I would say, though, keep your subject lines very short on sponsored InMail, under 30 characters. Now, that can be kind of challenging to write. I struggle with that myself sometimes, but keep it punchy and short. Otherwise, it'll get truncated on the mobile device. And then we have our call to action button. No matter how long your message is or how much scrolling you may have, the button will always be above the fold on the mobile device, anchored right here. And you can write whatever your call to action you desire it to be, as long as it's within 25 characters. So I'll share some tips for the body and the content next. But the number one thing I would say is that you should always make sure your copy is typo-free, obviously, that it's easy to read, and that it provides value and is mobile-friendly. So ways you can do that are by being brief. It's always better to be really short and to the point. Don't let yourself be tempted into rambling on. Respect your audience's time, and know that you should be able to get to the point quickly, and that will have a higher open rate. I also recommend having a text link, just one. Don't have too many to have too many call to actions. And ideally, that text link should be the same as your call to action button, so it just increases your chance of a click-through rate. I also like to have bullet points. If you have, say, 2 or 3 points you want to make, they're very easy for the eye to follow down the page, leading you down towards that call to action button, and it just helps you really get to the point quickly. I would say keep your bullet point list short, though. Don't go beyond more than 4 bullet points. 3 is kind of the sweet point. If you get down to 4, it's going to feel like you're sending someone your grocery list rather than a dedicated message in a professional environment. Another thing to note is don't make your bullet points be a paragraph. Try to keep them to no more than 2 lines, but I would say try to avoid having them wrap if at all possible. And lastly is just to provide value. Remember, this is being seen in their sponsored InMail is being seen in the LinkedIn inbox. You should be providing value, remembering all these things we just talked about in terms of context and why people are on LinkedIn. And if you provide them with value, they'll be more likely to click. So the last ad unit we'll talk about are the LinkedIn dynamic ads. Dynamic ads are increasing in popularity. This is our desktop solution, and it runs inside an IAB ad space of 300 by 250. But it's not your usual static image or animated GIF that is in an ad unit. It's created inside of LinkedIn, and this allows you to leverage the viewer's data and make the ad unit more personal and a better experience. And it's really important because we see more marketers today making personalization a top priority. And for good reason. Dynamic ads have great performance rates. I've just pulled that up on the screen here for you. Now, again, it varies by region. This is a benchmark for APAC for what good looks like, but in some markets like Indonesia, I've seen click-through rates as high as 0.17%, just for your standard display dynamic ad. Let me walk you through the specs and what this looks like to further illustrate the type of personalization that we're looking at. So I'll start with the image of the person. So when I come to LinkedIn, if I were to be targeted, in this case, by LinkedIn, with a dynamic ad, I would see my profile image and our logo. But if my friend Ben were to come to LinkedIn and see the same ad unit, he'd see all the same copy, but he would see his face there. And so would Olivia. She'd want to click on herself. So moving around here on the page, you have your secondary copy up at the top. It's called secondary, even though it's at the top of the page, because it's smaller font, which means you can write a little more characters than the main one. The main one will be right below the person's image and the logo. Next, you have the logo. In this case, I'm showing you a LinkedIn logo. If it was your dynamic ad, it would be your brand's logo. So let's say you didn't want to have your logo. You wanted to try another image. That's totally fine. You can upload a 100 by 100 pixel image. In this case, I'm showing you a couple of our standard logos that we have for other products and services, just depending on what I'd want to talk about. You can upload whatever you want there, as long as it's within the 100 by 100 dimensions. You have a call to action button. Remember that it's 25 character cap. And then you have your primary call to action. This one you definitely must include. The secondary one is optional. And the primary one, that's going to give that person the whole value prop around why to click, and then your CTA down below it. In this example, I have learn more, but I would say that sometimes something more specific than learn more can help. So for example, in a webinar, I would say register today. If it was an event, I'd say register today as well. Download now for an ebook. So tailor it based on what you're trying to show them. So in closing about the ad units, I wanted to put this little cheat sheet together for you. When we send the slides around at the end, you'll be able to print this out, put it at your desk. It's really a cheat sheet for you to consider based on your marketing goals. So you may have awareness, event attendance, demand generation, and then I've listed a few products you may want to try. I would say try more than one product if you can, but if your budget is really limited, you may want to zero in on one product and just see how it goes. That way you can get the most reach and scale out of it and see if it works for you. Anyway, good guidelines for you to try. All right, so our next section is on targeting. Targeting is how you're going to get the most bang for your buck on LinkedIn. And I want to ask our last question to the audience here at this time. What is your biggest targeting challenge? So I've listed a few options here for you to choose. Accuracy, reach, frequency, scale. There might be others, but I figured I'd keep the list short here to save time. So let's see what everyone's saying. Whoa, accuracy is the top one. Reach, frequency, scale. So they can all be challenging is my guess. I know it can be. So, and I didn't plant this, but if you're saying accuracy is your top challenge, then I think you'll be very happy with LinkedIn. As I said, the data that LinkedIn provides is actually provided by our members. So why are our members giving us all this data, and is it accurate? The answer is yes. This is a professional profile of record for many of us. So the data that we have on here needs to be an accurate reflection of who we are. It represents ourselves as professionals to help us understand each other as colleagues, business partners, and yes, even when we're looking for a new job too. So the data is accurate, and that is why people want to provide it to us. So here is an example of a profile of my friend Ashita. has all sorts of information she wants to share with the world at large, including, for example, geography. And you can actually target, little known fact, you can target based geography on 2 different ways. You can say the IP address of someone you're trying to reach, or the specific listed geography. So as a caveat to understand how that would be, I'm based in Australia, and so on my profile, it says I'm based in Sydney, Australia, but I have an APAC role. I travel a lot, and I often go to our headquarters in Mountain View in San Francisco. So when I'm overseas, my IP address will be different. So if I go to San Francisco for a conference, it'll tag me as being in San Francisco. So our geography is really interesting. You can target people based on where they are, even if they're traveling a lot, which can be great if you are targeting business travelers. Other things to target that are on a profile that you'll see on the next slide you can target by include someone's title, their company, their education, whether it's their school or their field of study, and also interests, which we are able to gather through group affiliations or skills they've listed. Okay, so let's kind of put this together. How would the targeting facets, how would you choose the different targeting facets if you want to reach someone? Sorry, little error here clicking through. Okay, so just remember, it's a person, not a cookie. So let's call this person Olivia. Here's an example of the things you could reach on her profile. So, of course, she's saying she's based in Singapore. Maybe in this case, we want to target people in Singapore based on IP. We want to target people based on their education level. We could try and think about someone's school, their field of study, their degree. If you want to target someone by age, we can do that as well. It's inferred based on the year they graduate. We also can create a target audience based on someone's company size, industry, or even company name. And as you saw on the slide with Nishita, she listed her job title. So from this, we're able to get information such as function and seniority. We know that people join groups, and so we can target based off the type of groups and interest, as well as skills. Skills are huge because people want to showcase what they're able to do. So you can get skills as well. An additional thing I'd like to make sure to list here, even though it's not on the slide, is website retargeting is also available. So if you have messaging or content specifically for people who have already been on your site or your landing page, you can now find them and share this highly relevant messaging with your strong call to action and therefore increase your campaign performance. So it's really nice in terms of you could have one set of creative that doesn't include website retargeting and is trying to drive people to your site, and then have website retargeting and hit them later with that additional messaging. So the most popular question I hear about targeting is, how narrow should someone target? My advice is to start as broad as possible, and I say this for 2 reasons. Excuse me. One is, the broader the audience, the more cost-effective it would be. Once you start adding a lot of filters, that narrows and narrows and narrows that audience set. And as I'll show you when we go into the demo, sponsored content, sponsored InMail, dynamic ads, they're all bidded. So you need to have a competitive bid, and the fewer that audience is, the more expensive they are. So the broader you are, the more cost effectiveness you can have. The second is that it allows you to learn about who's engaging with your messaging. I apologize if you hear a bell tolling, everyone. My conference room here in Sydney is right next to this bell tower, so apologies for that. Anyways, where was I about targeting? So basically, you can learn about your audience if you start off broad. There's a demographics area in Campaign Manager. So as you're looking at your campaign performance, you can start to see the types of people that engage with certain messaging. That can then inform new creatives that you do in the future that hones in on a more specific audience that you're seeing. So for example, let's make this a little more real. Let's say you want to target something based on research. So let's say our team's conducted research on the finance industry. That finance industry research won't be relevant for people who work at universities. So we would only target the finance industry for that specific research. But if I want to target the C-suite as another example, that would really depend on the type of content I have to show them. So for example, if I'm doing a product demo, I'm probably not going to target a CEO about a product demo. But if I have a report on market trends or what's happening in the economy, that might be better for a CEO. It's really up to you to use your best judgment, and I would say if you have a hunch about something, always test it. Test things multiple times because you never know if that slightly different wording may have a different outcome in the future. Always be testing. All right, so I'm going to switch over here and do a live demo for you in Campaign Manager. This is so you'll see what it's like to actually go in and set up a campaign. So give me just a moment as we start. Great, so let me show you how to get started creating a brand new campaign in LinkedIn's interface called Campaign Manager. The steps for all of our ad formats are pretty much the same, but to save time, we'll focus on LinkedIn's most popular product, sponsored content. You can choose sponsored content, text ads, and InMail, all right here. For content today, I'll choose this. You're directed to a 4-part series where you start setting your campaign up. So on this screen, you simply enter the name of your campaign. I've pre-selected this one, Live Webinar Demo A. Calling it this to make absolutely sure that other people who are fellow admins in this particular account don't get this campaign confused with one of theirs or someone else's. So make sure your campaign names are clear and easy to understand. Next, you choose your language. There are 19 you can select from based on the copy for your ad. And then pay note to this particular button right here. If you want to attract new followers to your company page or your showcase page, you can optionally include a follow button that will live in the top right corner of the sponsored content unit. But please do note that if an audience clicks on that follow action, they will follow your page, but that will also register as a paid click. So if increasing the follower base of your company page is not a priority for you for this particular campaign, then you simply untick or unclick this button and it's removed. Additionally, LinkedIn offers the ability to track conversions, which you can see listed right here. Now, in order to use this, you need to be using LinkedIn's pixel across your site and your landing pages. It's called LinkedIn's Insights tag. If you don't have it, that is okay. You can proceed to the next step. You just won't have that added data on your campaign and the analytics that shows your progress against conversions. So you click next and we go on. This next part is where you pick the ideal audience for your campaign. You have lots of options to choose from here, and this is all based on LinkedIn's data from our members. It's easy to pick their data, their demographics and their firmographics across. We actually have 470 million members to choose from. So you can include or exclude different things. For example, I may want to target India. I would select India, Australia, Singapore. Keep going on. And then down here you can select other options such as company name, company industry, someone's job title, someone's job function. I like to go with job function because I may not know all the different titles to choose from. Now, if you don't know what particular function and you don't want to type here a lot of different ones, you can check out a list that we've already consolidated based on functions we're seeing people have on LinkedIn. So for example, if I want to target other marketers like myself, I could choose marketing. I could also include people from media and communications and maybe even product management. Maybe you can see all your selections just like on geography show below. And you can continue adding others. But what I would suggest is keep it broad and then look at the campaign performance later on to see if there's other ideas for niche content related to demographics that may be engaging really highly, and then you can create more niche campaigns after that. Another great feature is you can save this audience template so that for future campaigns you can apply the same targeting criteria when you go to set it up. You can also opt to include audience expansion. If you forget what it is, that's okay. You can just hover over any of the little question marks that you see on the site, but it basically broadens your search, expands that target audience by looking for other audiences that are similar to these guys but maybe have different specifications in their profile. All right, then you click next and we move on. Almost done. One more step before launching your campaign, and that is to figure out your budget. You can choose to pay CPC, cost per click, or CPM, cost per impression for sponsored content. I typically will choose CPC for campaigns where I'm really focused on driving leads or traffic, but if I'm more concerned with reach, then I'll go with CPM. I like to go ahead and just expand everything all in one go. You can enter your bid for that content. Now, sponsored content, sponsored InMail, text ads, they're all in a bidded ecosystem, which means you only pay 1 penny more than the next highest bidder. Having a higher bid helps you potentially win that auction. Also, having really great content that's performing well increases your relevance and will help you win the auction as well. Let's say, for example, I wanted to actually bid $5. This is USD for this particular account. I could say $5, but if the next highest bidder was only paying $3.01, I would only pay $3.02 and win that auction. So I would never go above 5. Another feature you may want to consider using is your daily budget. So if you have a tight budget, but you want it to spend evenly over a period of time, you can put in what your daily cap would be. You can have your campaign start immediately, or you can drop down and select a date you would like your campaign to start, and you can also flight your end date here as well. I recommend running for a couple of weeks so you can make tweaks over time. It's totally up to you. You can also see here that it says the time zones are in UTC, so make sure you're adjusting what you have in mind for that. And then you can enter your total budget here. And then you would launch your campaign. So that's how you get started with sponsored content and create campaigns in Campaign Manager. There's lots of analytics in here as well, and you'd be able to see your campaigns show up. Do a quick search. You'd be able to see any campaign that you had come up here. And lots of data to look at here as well. Performance, social actions, that includes likes, follows, and more. Performance includes impressions, clicks, CTR. Conversions and leads is applicable to you if you have the Insights pixel installed on your pages and you're tracking those. And then your budget has the data that you've already entered for these particular campaigns, but you can click on the pencil icon and update. And if you want to pause or restart any campaigns, you can choose these toggle buttons here. So these are the basics for Campaign Manager, and hopefully this is enough to help you get started and increase your confidence in the tool. So hopefully that gave you a good view of how to get started. You can actually spend lots of time in Campaign Manager or as little time as you want. I like to go in and look at the performance of my campaigns over time, but in the essence of making sure we have enough time today on the phone with each other to answer your question, kind of stops there. So just kind of as a recap to help you get started, remember to think about the different types of ad products that we have and the types of content that you have that you think these ads will help you promote and complement. Definitely set up a company page. We didn't have time to go into company page setup today, but there's information on our site on how to set one up if you don't already have one. Assign different roles and responsibilities in Campaign Manager. Again, we didn't have time to go too much detail into that, but I do want to call this out because if you have a big team and you have some people that are content creators and good copywriters, you may want them focused on writing that content. You may have other people that are great with metrics, but you may not want them writing content that would be on your company page. You can set rules and responsibilities around that to basically only allow people to do certain things that you want. And another tip that I wanted to make sure to remind everyone is just to share content that is relevant in a professional context. And I think we actually got a few questions in the Q&A about this. So I'll go ahead and go over to that now because it looks like we're getting a ton of questions, which is fantastic. And I want to thank you guys for all this amazing engagement. Okay, so let me scan through and see some of the most popular ones. All right, so one person asked, what are the top 3 most important targeting categories? That's going to vary by each company, depending on what your content is. Without knowing any more about your content, and when I'm talking to my friends about getting started, first I would say geo, because being in APAC, and by APAC, Asia Pacific, being in APAC, we may have offers here or talking in different currencies that may not be relevant, say, to the U.S. So I would think about geo first. The next one I would think about is function, job function. The job function for me, for example, if I wanted to run a webinar campaign like I did today, I would target marketers. I wouldn't necessarily be interested in what industry they were in. I just want to know that I can reach marketers because marketers in general will be interested in this topic. It wasn't necessarily segmented today by industry. So job function would be important. Now, there are other categories related to jobs, like titles. And titles are great, but one thing I would say and hesitate around titles is it's more specific. And some companies have really crazy job titles. We even have, for example, we have people on our team who are content marketing evangelists, and we have content marketing managers. And so if you don't know to say content marketing evangelist, you may leave out a whole bunch of people. So saying function of marketing might be a lot better at reaching people who are really relevant that may have kind of an interesting title. And then the next one I would say is number 3 would be industry. There are times you have content that is relevant for financial services, for tech companies, for travel. So knowing what type of business your audience is would be the one below that. But if you're in, say, an EDU, so if you're at a university and you're trying to drive people to register for classes, you may want to target by education level instead. So it really depends on you, but my top 3 for my campaigns that I run are geo, job function, and industry. So another question. Another question would be, what did we mean by provide value on the InMail slide? I realize now that's a little vague, so thank you for calling me out on that. Providing value is just, I think about like having a value exchange with your audience. So you don't want to be spammy. So if you think about the types of messages maybe you receive over email, for example, these one-liners that basically are asking you to do something and not giving you anything back as the audience. So like, hey, register today, and it doesn't tell you why you should register. It just says register for an event. That's not really helpful. So if you can instead focus on providing value. So say, for example, as an event, you say, attend this event to learn X, Y, Z, or to hear these people talk. So you're really providing them value as they go along. You could also talk about offers. I've seen some interesting campaigns where people have tried to drive sign-ups for loyalty programs, for example. that can be very spammy, but if you make it relevant to that person so that they see why that loyalty program is going to help them, whether it is get more value out of their budget because they'll be getting different rewards and things, that can really help. So by providing value, I really mean just don't spam people. Be respectful of their eyeballs and their time. Another question is, can we target sponsored content by device? Unfortunately not, and also when you target sponsored content, it's going to reach people on mobile as well as desktop. Same thing with InMail. We're not going to discriminate. I know it's a popular topic. I used to work at AdMob many years ago, so I know device targeting is a really important thing for certain industries. But we made this decision on LinkedIn because we want the user's experience to be congruent. So, for example, if they saw it on their mobile, let's say you were only targeting iPhones. So if they read the sponsored content or the sponsored InMail on their iPhone, and then they later went to their desktop and they didn't see it, that wouldn't be a very good experience for them. So that is the reason we are forcing the targeting to be in this way. We want it to be that member's experience coming first. But that is a common request that I've heard. Another question on targeting, lots of targeting questions. Are we restricted to only our contact list? You can target by your contact list if you like. That's great for account-based marketing strategies. If you want to try and solve those on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it. But you can target much broader than that. It's really important for advertisers to reach new audiences, so we have that enabled, people who may not be in your contact list. So all those options are in the targeting that I showed. That doesn't necessarily include your targeting list or your contact list, so you can have both. Let's see, some additional questions. Let's see. See some questions. Some people have had challenges setting up the conversion tracking pixel. It's called the Insights tag or Insights tag here at LinkedIn. It's really hard for me to answer that question quite broadly here on a webinar. Basically, like for our own sites, we have our marketing ops team set that up for us. It's basic in theory. All you have to do is copy and paste it, but you could be encountering some other challenges. So we'll try, if you can submit your contact details here in the chat, we'll try to get you in touch with someone who can help you with that if you're having issues. Let's see. Is LinkedIn working on a lead generation platform? We do have some exciting products coming out specifically around lead generation that I really wanted to share with you today that are currently in beta. Stay tuned for more coming out around lead generation, but you can use LinkedIn as it is today, even without that product, to generate leads. Depending on how your page is set up, you would just need to have your content or something gated on your website, so you would collect leads through your form. We also offer something called autofill. So autofill, you may have seen it when you registered for this webinar today. It was the form on the right. You can contact your representative if you want to get set up with that. I personally love it because I do tend to sign up for a lot of things and I hate filling in my details. I'm also the worst person in the world. I'll Mickey Mouse data if I don't want to be contacted. You guys probably encounter that with some of your list hygiene that you may get from your campaigns. So if you're using form fill, it's really autofill. It's super easy for that person once they're on your landing page to click a button, and it autofills most of the form with their LinkedIn information. So name, email address, all that sort of stuff. So you can make sure your forms stay really clean. So I suggest using that if you can. See if we have time for a couple more questions. Okay, about InMail. Does open rate mean the recipient read the email? If they opened it, then it was on their screen, so we can't track if their eyeballs are moving down the screen. I would love to be able to do that. If they opened it, it went from being closed to open, so that's a pretty good indication that you sparked someone's interest. What's the max for email sending per week? You can send as many InMails as you want and can afford in your budget. That said, we put that 60-day limit that I mentioned on the screen. That's on our end, and we control that because we don't want people's inboxes to get spammed. When it's on LinkedIn, we don't, because it's not someone's email, we don't have to worry necessarily about canned spam laws like you would see in the States, but we have our own rules because if the environment becomes full of ads, then we might see attrition in the usage of InMail. So we have a limit. As a user, you can only receive a sponsored InMail once every 60 days, and that is the max that you could receive it. A lot of people go months at a time and don't receive it. We do have certain audiences of people that get more than others, but even those highly saturated audiences, the max they could get in InMail is once every 60 days. So you can send InMails as often as you like. You may just, because of that, the audience pool gets smaller, so just keep that in mind. Let's see, it looked like that same person had a couple of questions about InMail that's getting lost in the feed here. Is it possible to see who opened? That is a question I get a lot, and I shouldn't be surprised to see it here, but I'm actually delighted by it because it brings up a whole array of other questions. But basically, no, you cannot see the individual who opened it. We do share open rates, so you can see how successful it's going. We have to comply by different rules and regulations around personally identifiable information, or PII data. So someone opening that InMail, while I would like to see that too for my campaigns, I can't see that. That person, by opening your InMail, is not giving you permission to know anything about them or to contact them. So they can read your message. It's only when they click and take an action that you start to see more information about them. So no, unfortunately, we can't expose that data, but that is an excellent question. Let's see. Where do we put the creatives for the campaign? You need to open this back up. Sorry if the video was a little unclear by that. My demo account was a little hard to show creating the creative from scratch, and also just in the essence of time, so we'd have time for all these questions I used that was already created. But basically there was a button and it would say, create a new ad. It would walk you through, headline, image, where do you want to link it to, and you would save it. And then as you saw like that list of creative, and then I ticked the box to the left to choose it. Your creative would live in there if you were going in and trying to run a new campaign and wanted to use that same creative. And then if you mean where do you put your creatives, you can view them when you're looking at campaign results. You can see what your creatives were. You can look at results by campaign, but also by creative in that campaign. And I guess I could decipher this question another way. Where do the creatives live? The creatives live in the news feed. If someone goes to your company page or showcase page, they can also see your creative on that page. But most people don't actually go to a company page to consume information about a brand. They'll go to a company page to find out more about a company because maybe they want to invest in, like from a stock perspective, maybe think about buying stock in that company, or they want to apply for a job at that company. They don't typically go there because they want to buy something. The best way to engage with someone who's a prospective buyer is by reaching them in the news feed, because they may not even know you exist, or if you're a well-known, well-established brand, they may not know you could solve that particular problem. So the best way to engage with prospective buyer is through their news feed. And I like to think about it as you going to them, not them going to you. So you're basically doing the work as a marketer and as a brand to reach out to those people. So yes, your creative can live also on your company page. If you are wanting to run a piece of creative and for some reason do not want it on your company page, you can hide that. There's a feature called direct sponsored content, and you basically would just click this eyeball that would cross out the eyeball, so it means it's kind of hidden from there. I actually use that a lot because we're targeting audiences in Australia and India, et cetera, and so we may not want that content may not be relevant to everyone globally, so we'll do direct sponsored content. That meaning it is directly delivered into the news feed, and if someone goes to our company page, they do not see it there. So a long-winded way of interpreting that question multiple ways. I hope that was helpful. Let's see. I think we might have time for one more question. Just looking through here. There were some questions around how fast budget was being spent. So I saw it earlier. Since you have time, I wanted to address it. I think the question was around wanted to bid like $10, wanted to spend $30, but blew through the budget really quickly. $10, $30, those are really small budgets on LinkedIn. That's great to just kind of test and see if it's getting spent, but that's quite small depending on how big your audience is. So when we're talking about targeting by country, by geo, it opens up your pool, and you could also be in a highly engaged target audience segment, so they're coming and seeing a lot. I would say if you can increase your budget beyond $30 a day, that would be best. You will spend $30 a day really quickly on LinkedIn, but at least you'll be seen by that target audience that you want. It'll just be earlier in the day rather than across the whole day. So I think that is about it on time. We'll try to collect all these questions here. We had nearly 100 questions coming through here in the feed, so apologies that we don't have time to get to all of it, but we will have some of our specialists follow up with you guys. And thank you so much for joining today, and good luck with your next campaign. Have a great one.